Hello and welcome to the blockchain regulation meeting. We have a Blockstart webinar today with some very prominent and very competent guests joining us today, which I'm super happy about it. And I will introduce them in a minute. My name is Vytautas Černiauskas. I'm an expert at the Blockstart program. And Blockstart is an EU-financed blockchain acceleration program that helps developers working with digital ledger solutions and blockchain-based solutions to foster their relations with SMEs and to commercialize their products and ideas. And regulation is definitely one of the hot topics and interesting challenges that that come up from time to time in this fair. There are different initiatives and different already not solutions, but different ideas about how to regulate or not regulate this growing space. And today we will look deeper into challenges and barriers that SMEs and other players are facing when working with blockchain-based solutions, and also hopefully we'll discuss about how to overcome those barriers and what kind of regulation would actually help develop blockchain-based solutions and products and services instead of preventing them from booming and helping to create value. Now let's move to the presentation of our speakers. Yes, thank you. We have Tudor Stanciu from Digital to Law joining us. We have Sonia Muniz from Santander. We have Johannes Mikkonen from the token project and digital governance Demos Helsinki. And I hope that we would have Arnaud as well joining us. He's experiencing some technical issues, but let's hope that he will manage to connect and eventually help us discuss the jungle of blockchain regulation. So thank you again for joining us today, and let's move to the first speaker today. We will have first a little bit of a presentation format where Tudor, Sonia, Johannes will present their knowledge from their perspectives. Tudor will be talking a little bit from the legal point of view and overview of the situation of blockchain regulation. Sonia will discuss and tell about how blockchain networks are used in public services in Spain, and they had actually a pilot or a trial project in Santander. Johannes will also talk about blockchain in the public sector and about this policy observatory initiative that happens also working Santander and beyond. Now, Tudor, I think you could start sharing your slides and talk a bit about your perspective. And after viewing your interventions, we will actually have a discussion between all ourselves and discuss actually how to overcome the challenges that we're facing. But before Tudor you start, I will actually ask our participants that are joining on different channels to answer a question, a poll, sorry. And also there's a quick Q&A option in this webinar. So if you will have questions, feel free to write them down in the Q&A section. We will, if we have enough time, we will try to answer them either in the oral format or in the written format, depending on how much time and space we have. So I'm launching the first poll. We just want to know a little bit about which organization do you come from? Just a bit from the statistical point of view. So if you could just very quickly present yourselves, that would be very helpful. Let's. Okay, Tudor, I think you can start. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Vytautas, thanks a lot for the invitation. We're gonna start off this session with something which is usually kind of a dry subject when we're discussing about regulation. I don't plan to basically go through the large panorama of regulation that may be applicable to blockchain projects in general, but merely just to point out some initiatives. I've called these sets of slides blockchain institutionally an overview because, as some of you or many of you may be aware, we don't have a specific set of regulation that would be applicable to blockchain in general. And from my perspective, I don't think that would even be a scenario that we would want to be in. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that at the end of the presentation. So this is just an overview of different areas of regulation, which I think from different perspectives, depending on the implementation you use for a blockchain technology or for a DLT, may be applicable. So most of what we're seeing in the blockchain space on an European Union level, I think reverts to the European Commission's agenda for Digital Europe. It relates a lot to the digital goals set through that agenda, and the initiatives that we're currently seeing still revolve mostly around dissemination of information, gathering information from the market to understand what areas would need regulation. And the only area of blockchain that made its way, let's say, on this pathway to regulation is the markets in crypto assets regulation, the pilot program for DLTs, which are the more advanced areas being regulated. Apart from that, we also have a series of initiatives focusing on this area. One of them is the European Blockchain Partnership, which aims to develop this strategy on blockchain and building an infrastructure in which each of the member states plus several other states in Europe would be hosting a node in an infrastructure called the European Blockchain Services Infrastructure. The focus of the partnership is on broad-based deployment of blockchain services, making blockchain-based services interoperable with one another and basically creating some form of standardization. And creating an environment that makes blockchain-based projects be regulatory compliant. And I hope we will discuss and the partnership will end to this idea of being compliant by design. So setting some ground rules on how, when you start a blockchain-based project, you can be compliant by design if you follow some set of principles. There's also this plan of a pan-European regulatory sandbox for use cases in the European blockchain services infrastructure in different areas, in the different verticals of applicability. From the information I gathered, it should be operational in the next couple of years, this year and the next year. Going back to the European blockchain services infrastructure, this peer-to-peer network of interconnected nodes where each node is hosted by one of the 27 EU member states, plus Norway, Liechtenstein, and the European Commission. The idea is to come up with a framework in which private and public actors can tap into to develop applications that make use of this common infrastructure. There's a list of an initial set of use cases that I've seen being pushed forward. Notarization is one, diplomas and granting validity and providing a proof of authenticity for university and academia diplomas. And a problem which, an area which at least from my part of Europe, from Romania, I think would be really, really welcome, this idea of trusted data sharing among authorities, with very much needed on a national level, but I can see the appeal of having it even on a regional or on a European scale, which would, let's say, impact the lives of the consumers, of the end consumers, that would be able to maybe provide proof of their different types of data or different types of information that relates to them with an easier ways to do such sharing with authorities. We have the European Union Blockchain Observatory and Forum, whose mission is to monitor blockchain initiatives in Europe and make policy recommendations. The purpose is, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, the dissemination of information and general education in the larger field of blockchain, which is, again, the approach that usually the European Commission takes when it wants to understand a little bit what the market perspectives are and where the European Union and its regulatory bodies could get involved to provide pieces of legislation. And if we're moving, let's say, a little bit with a vertical approach, I mentioned at the beginning that the area of crypto and of digital assets, as a result of the market gaining traction over the past 4 or 5 or 6 years, has been the area where traditionally regulation has ended up appearing, because it's the most prominent use case of blockchain up to date. And where the first step we've seen is EU regulation or EU directives that are being applicable to different markets, let's say, or to different types of assets or different types of instruments being used, such as the case with financial instruments, have received ways of and words of interpretation from different supervisory bodies, as is the ESMA, which has provided this advice report stating in which cases a crypto asset could be considered as a financial instrument. And again, we could see that when we're discussing about financial instruments, depending on the way in which crypto assets or digital assets are being used, it may be the case that other areas of regulation may also be applicable: the prospectus regulation, the market abuse regulation, or the anti-money laundering directives. The markets in crypto assets regulation and the pilot program for DLT are, let's say, the first pieces of legislation or of inception of legislation that aims to regulate specifically these use cases of the blockchain technology. The common thread is this idea of trying to standardize an approach when you run a blockchain-based project, which I think is very welcome. But on the final slides, I'm probably not going to be as optimistic, because my personal experience revolving around working with professional associations and with technology companies and with the regulatory bodies in general is not as close to what is envisaged by these regulations or by the preambles of these regulations. This idea of standardization is not that practically embraced on a regulatory level from what I've seen. And finally, when we discuss about blockchain-based projects, we have to think a little bit wider and see which types of other regulations may be applicable. Let's call them general regulations that may come into play. The GDPR is something that has been discussed ever since it appears, its interplay with the blockchain and how such a regulation may be applicable to blockchain-based infrastructures. There's this discussion that we all know about how the right to erase, to ask for the erasure of your personal data may be applicable to a blockchain-based infrastructure. Another interesting discussion revolves around intellectual property, who owns the intellectual property, and again, in the context of blockchain-based projects trying to raise investment, we're still in this paradigm where an early stage startup needs to prove, among other things, that it owns the intellectual property over what they've developed. And in the context of a blockchain-based infrastructure with multiple nodes contributing to the infrastructure, it may be more difficult to be able to do that. Aspects related to the security of the network may also be involved. Specific areas of technology that interplay with the blockchain in artificial intelligence and Internet of Things may also come into play. The consumer protection area is very important, as we've seen in the past with the rise of the ICOs and of other token generating events that pose serious problems and unfortunately sometimes cast a not so positive shade over the entire industry, unfortunately. And finally, another aspect which I think is relevant and hopefully on an EU level or maybe on an international level, regulators will be able to tackle it better than they have done with the advent of the internet. Create some form of regulation that governs and sets clear ideas about how jurisdiction is involved and where you can make different claims in a blockchain-based infrastructure that may operate on a very, very international level. Unfortunately, I think the rules that we have now setting which national laws apply to a given situation or which court has authority to adjudicate over a certain claim are not at all in line with the developments of the internet and with the developments of, moreover, the development of a blockchain-based solution. And just to wrap up a little bit, I wanted to get to this slide. And again, maybe this jumps the gun a little bit for the final part of the conversation. But since I also acted as the initial president of the Romanian FinTech Association and also had experience in the past 2 or 3 years ago with some initiatives of the Romanian regulators trying to understand how they could put into words and into regulation this idea of DLT, I wanted to just share 5 ideas about how regulation should be approached in the digital age. First of all, you have to make a decision. Do you want to regulate technology or you want to regulate use cases, or that is, do you want to regulate horizontally or you want to regulate vertically? From my perspective, the idea of regulating technology is bad because it leaves regulation even further behind the way society advances. It's very well known that regulation usually comes to regulate different activities in society that have become abundant and that require regulation. But I think if we decide to regulate blockchain or to regulate AI in itself and not think about the use cases and not try to come up with something that is overarching into a particular way, we might end up being left far behind because technology advances quite rapidly, and what we define today as blockchain may not be relevant anymore in a couple of years' time. Try to involve the small and up-and-coming industry players when dealing with new technology. Unfortunately, I think the GDPR is an example of how not to approach regulation. The GDPR has a blanket approach for almost any kind of company, regardless of their area of activity, of their size, and so on. So I've seen it in practice working with digital and technology startups as a lawyer. I've seen it in practice how difficult it is for them to be able to grasp the broad extent of the GDPR, because it doesn't make sense when you're a bootstrap company to have the same threshold of compliance that the Facebooks and the Amazons and the Googles of the world also need to abide by but they're operating with hundreds of thousands and millions and billions of data points. So you need to have a voice of the small players, of the up and coming entrepreneurs, of the up and coming people using emerging technologies when you want to draft regulation. Where they exist, involve industry associations. I'm glad to say that the Romanian FinTech Association was set up exactly for this purpose, to give the small players a way to, the small Romanian FinTech players, a way to interact with local and European authorities, and with the help of the European Digital Finance Association, which is a meeting of minds of all the national FinTech associations or of associations dealing with digital finance. They are able to put upfront a discussion whenever the case with the European Commission, with the European Parliament, and so on, in the name of the hundreds of startups and scale-ups that are operating in Europe in the space of FinTech, but which do not have a voice and do not have, let's say, lobby making or policy making power up to this point. So again, I think that's good to try as a regulator to involve industry associations and set up communication channels with them. And finally, the last 2 points are quite intertwined. You need to set up task forces within regulating bodies. In the case of PSD2, I know there are certain countries that have basically set up within their regulating bodies in charge with the implementation of PSD2 and in charge with licensing and authorization under PSD2, have set up groups of people which specifically interact with companies wanting to get their licenses and authorizations in check. And the second aspect is, if you can move up a notch a little bit and develop a tech department within regulating bodies that is bringing technology people inside regulating bodies that understand the technology and that are involved in the process of giving an authorization or a license or providing an answer to a question related to the way you need to interpret a certain legal aspect. That's a very welcomed approach. I haven't seen it so far, but I hope to see it, at least locally in Romania. I haven't seen it. I'm sure probably in other countries, there are technology and digital experts involved working in regulating bodies. I expect to see more of that because this age is a digital first age, and regulation, I think, needs to follow the way technology works. And in order to do that, you need to have people that understand the technology better than, let's say, or at least at the same level as the industry leaders and the market leaders are doing it. That's about it from my side at this point.
Thank you, Tudor. It was a great overview, very well structured and very well put. And just a quick question reacting to your slides. What do you think is the area where the regulation is either most needed, or where you see the biggest challenges in terms of, I don't know, the lack of regulatory framework, or problems coming from different perspectives? It might be consumer protection, it might be, I don't know, privacy, it might be some technological issues or identification issues, or I don't know, whatever. I don't want to put words into your mouth, but what is the most urgent or the most,
so
or the
Yeah. So I think I'm dealing with a lot with investment in startups and a lot with GDPR and intellectual property, and I think I'm trying to see it from the perspective of the startups that I'm working with, and I see their main pain point up to now has been related to the GDPR. So unfortunately, um, and again, probably it comes as a result that since the GDPR entered into force, it's been on everybody's mind. You've had a lot of experts popping up on the GDPR. And so a lot of startups and entrepreneurs have learned that, oh, I need to be compliant with the GDPR, but the GDPR sets a high a high fine if I'm not compliant with it, but I don't have the resources to do it. So I think the GDPR, unfortunately, even if it's only it's 3 years since it's gone into force, I think it needs a revamping. Probably it would have needed a revamping from the moment it entered into force. And again, if we talk about the blockchain space, the GDPR was not designed in a moment when the blockchain was as prevalent in society as it is now. So from my perspective, that's one area where I'm still seeing issues and entrepreneurs and companies having a tough time understanding how they can be compliant while at the same time not breaking the bank or not doing more than they're supposed to be doing when they're bootstrapped at the beginning.
Understand. Again, thank you a lot, Tudor. And we will, as you said, you were a bit ahead when talking about specific recommendations, but those recommendations were very valid and very on point. So thanks again for that. And now we're going to switch to Arnaud.
Yes.
Arnaud, hello. Um, he's from Dutch Blockchain Association and Blockchain Knowledge Foundation. Probably, Arnaud, you can present yourself um, in a better way than I do. And now the floor is yours, and you you have several perspectives, but include in not limited, including also things about your experience in Malta, in Spain, in other countries, and if you could talk about the areas where you see challenges and what it means for digital systems such as blockchain to be regulated by non-digital frameworks, and also you have quite an experience as an advisor. If you can't comment on the challenges and hurdles that startups and other players are facing when working with blockchain systems and in terms of policy and regulation. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the nice warm introduction. And I was very lucky. We had a beautiful talk of Tudor, and I will elaborate on that. So my association is basically focusing on tools and methods to provide a structured way of implementing the blockchain. And there I saw in Tudor his remarks and his sheets, his great wish to create a kind of structured approach, or basically a compliance by design. And I fully agree with that. And I will give some examples to stress that point. And even his last point, talking about GDPR, is a similar issue, because these GDPR laws are there, and we must all agree that privacy is not everything that was promised to us. A lot of people will feel that we lost the battle of privacy to the digital giants all over the world, and something obviously went wrong. And maybe you can say that of a lot of laws and a lot of regulations. So I like to take the discussion to one higher level or look for another approach than start to dive into all kind of new regulations. So you gave a really great list of a really great overview of all possible bottlenecks in regulations, but can we find a kind of common ground to solve that? And I believe so. I like to introduce some principles, one you name already, and I call it digital asymmetry. That's basically something you do not want. You do not like that the government is automated and digitalized for some parts, for some procedures, and that there are some analog procedures in between. So the digital part is going nicely smooth and fast, and the moment that there is a kind of human intervention, for example, a regulation, and it's going to be handled by a commission or maybe a court or whatever it is, and then it takes a lot of time. And that's also my example in Spain, for example, or in Malta. They have this kind of sandbox approach for testing blockchain applications. And it's a very normal approach because we're used to test things. How could you ever know if something is working or not if you not test it? Well, there is another way, and I will come to that. But I first like to stress that testing may not be the best thing. It sounds so logic that you start to build a sandbox and start to test an application. All programmers always do that. The problem with testing is that you can find an error. You can also find 2 errors, or maybe you find 3. But how are you sure if you test and test that you found all errors? That's a problem. So if you do not find all errors and you talk about the blockchain, you talk about compliance and certification. And it must be without errors. It's the same thing if you would test the bank and you say, look, the bank is doing fine, but now in 1,000 cases, you lose your bank account. And we cannot trace it, by the way. Then we would not accept that. And we don't accept that from technology that we make now and then an error. And the same when you go to the aircraft industry, we do not accept that the plane drops out of the sky. And I believe last year there was not a plane dropped out of the sky. It was a special year anyway. But the year before that, it was also the case. Not a passenger plane was crashed and many people died. And that is because we go into depth and we take a lot of effort to prevent that. And that's not only done by testing. A lot of approaches, and I like to introduce that, is done in a more formal way using mathematics. So these are a kind of proof mechanisms that it is true. So in mathematics, you can test something with statistics. There's another kind of mathematics, but you also can have a kind of proof mechanism that is just true. And I would like to stress such kind of tools and methods within this framework. Tudor was also talking about. And when you use those methods and those tools, then by definition, you are compliant. And then you follow that framework. That would save us a lot of work. And what I see within a lot of environments is that this approach is not there. So we ourselves, Dutch Blockchain Association, offers a formal method. It's a natural language that translates a spoken language or a structured language that looks, for example, like Dutch, but it also could look like Spain, and it translated it into computer code. So you have one language that is understood by the machine and by the humans. It's the same as the legal language, for example. It's the Code Civil of Napoleon we all have. Well, it's not a perfect language, but we use it all over Europe. And it is to give instructions to our governmental systems, and I call them systems. It's the same as computer system. It's basically the programming language for our government. And we need a kind of digital language to do the same, to talk to systems and machines without error and misunderstanding. So, and that to solve that to have such a language is important to solve the fast way we need to have to automate, to maintain the code, and well, to all understand these machines. That's I guess I take a break now, otherwise I start to talk a lot, and maybe I give you some space to question something.
Yes, probably a similar question to you as the tutor. Oh, by the way, before I come to the question, I remember what I wanted to say before that. In Lithuania, we also, the Bank of Lithuania, the central bank, actually has also a regulatory sandbox where it's possible to test different blockchain solutions as well. There's a blockchain sandbox. Obviously, it is mostly, since it's run by the Bank of Lithuania, it's mostly focused on the in the fintech area of financial solutions, but probably other related areas could be explored as well. But the question is also looking from the challenge perspective. I think you had this good overview of a bit higher level maybe, and how to work on it on the government, from the government perspective, or from the bird's view. If you could maybe also talk about some examples where it's most crucial to talk about regulation, to talk about specific guidelines, or I know, maybe you have seen examples of what works, what doesn't work in different countries or ecosystems in terms of blockchain policy.
Now, what I see of all the cases that are going on is that they are very well willing, and they take up a lot of examples, and Tutor gave a long list, and you all the time see very long lists of their to-dos, and then you miss the interaction between the several legal frameworks. And a beautiful one that Tudor also mentioned was the GDPR. So the blockchain is the right, is a safe and secure, transparent and traceable mechanism. It's a beautiful value network. That's then the definition I have to give. But the privacy is just the opposite. You don't want to be traced, and of course, for the individual, that's very important. It's our right to freedom. We battled last century hard to get, and now in this digital world, the same problem pops up again, and. Yes, it is, and when you see the project and you see the startup struggling with that, of course, it's very hard. And basically, I'm really convinced that you can only do it by design with principles like self-sovereign identity and claim-based access control, and basically also build it in kind of tools. So there I fully agree with Tudor again, that if you do that with design, you can do that. And for example, within the blockchain world, that's basically a write once environment, and so it's very hard to change something. There is also never a talk about change mechanisms. How do you correct an error? Or, for example, roof privacy, because by definition, when you write it on the blockchain, you cannot get rid of it. So how do you correct a mistake and so on? How can we forgive someone and something? Well, we figured out that if you program that all the time, and you have to maintain that, and you like to change and adapt, and you must, because that's Darwin. If you don't adapt, you don't make it, and then you need to provide such a mechanism, and you must basically, it's such a large mechanism. What we found is that you have to build it in the tool. A blockchain tool must provide a mechanism for change and adaptation, and for correction, and also, I believe, for privacy. So there we go. Then you have tools and methods automated to tackle these problems, and it should not be I believe, the problem of the young entrepreneur who wants to design a system that it is, of course, he should know the basics of privacy, but it should not be his core issue. Then there is something going wrong. If every entrepreneur is very busy with the rules, and there's something wrong with the rules. If you are a startup and you spend all your day with the tax form, then there is something wrong with the tax form, obvious, because we need these entrepreneurs above all. And I think that are some things.
Yes, thank you. Some of the things that you have actually mentioned, they are sort of detrimental to the how blockchain functions as a technology. Talking about privacy and being able to change records, which is actually what blockchain is not about. It is about transparency, and if you record some transactions, pretty much the only way to rectify something is you cannot go back and change what it was some blocks behind, but you can just issue a new correction which comes afterwards. So
it's a beautiful riddle, isn't
yeah,
it? It's the other side of the medal. On one side, we are very happy that everything is traceable. But for example, if you have a crime, then and you can trace everything about this action or this mistake, let's not call it a crime, but just a mistake, a human mistake, and we can always trace it, then basically all the mistakes and crimes again are solved, because that's the whole point of being a criminal, that you cannot be traced, otherwise the fun is gone. And and that is so beautiful about the blockchain. That is all blockchain is all about compliance and certification for that reason. And then we have this beautiful other side of the medal, and it's called privacy. And there's a lot of talk about that. But if you design that in a proper way, and you do not store, of course, not the personal data of a blockchain, but only a reference to a hash, and a hash is basically a very simple question, like, is the hash of this person the same as the hash of this other person? And you only store on blockchain, yes. Well, then you only know that two hashes are the same. You don't know who it is. You only know, yes, and it's the only thing that you like to know. For example, one government institute likes to know from another government institute, does this person have a criminal record? Then the first asked question is does he exist in your database? And you don't have to know, but you say, look, I have here a hash of a person, and does this hash exist in your database? So then by design, you basically solve most of the problems. You don't connect databases. You just ask one question, one record, one hash of one person. So that's totally different than the old way where you connect to database. The blockchain leaves the integrity of the separate system totally intact. So it's not such a big issue. And that is what we make of it because of this old framework we have.
Okay, thank you, Arnaud. Thank you very much for your insights. I know we will come back to more discussion formats, but now I want to go to Sonia, to hear from Sonia. And I know that you have some interesting slides to show us and tell us a bit more about the work that you have been doing in Santander, in the area of blockchain, and how you've been using this technology, and if you could also share some of the challenges that you have faced maybe, and talk about them from the regulatory perspective, maybe policy, etc. The floor is yours, Sonia.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. And I would like to share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, the full screen, please.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation, and also thank you for the opportunity to participate in this event. And I would like to start this presentation providing some details of my hometown, Santander, that is located in the north coast of Spain and is the capital of Cantabria region. Santander has about 173,000 permanent inhabitants who are spread in an area of 33 square kilometers. So it's a medium-sized city, and its economy is mainly based on the service sector. However, our municipality is focusing efforts to drive the economy in new directions based on the innovation and the knowledge. So, in order to introduce my presentation, I would like to share with you which is our perspective of as a smart city. So,
Sonia, sorry to interrupt you. Can you please turn on the presenter mode, presentation full screen?
I think that I'm sharing my screen.
No, we're seeing your PowerPoint. Yeah, we're seeing your PowerPoint.
Are you
turn
seeing
on
my
the full screen?
The full screen. Okay, sorry. Now it's better?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you. Okay, so the first point is that I would like to share with you which is our perspective or our vision of a smart city. So for us, a smart city shall be focused on citizens and use the technology as a tool to provide more efficient services and to improve the quality of life of people. So taking into account this vision, the city of Santander is working in an economic and social transformation, fostering a smart, innovative, and open to society city model with the aim of providing more efficient and better quality urban services through the use of the new technologies, and besides stimulating business opportunities and employment creation. And how are we addressing this transformation? By following these 4 steps that you can see on this slide. Based on our experience, this transformation shall be carried out in a gradual manner, evaluating the needs of the different municipal services and developing pilots that will allow to test and to validate new solutions that will improve its efficiency. This exhaustive analysis of the different municipal areas will allow the elaboration of the transformation model, not only for each one of the municipal services, but for the city as a whole. Traditionally, municipal services information has remained in isolated silos. In turn, each one of the municipal services incorporates the technology in an isolated way in order to improve its operational efficiency, but often without having a global vision. With the implementation of the Smart City platform, all the data coming from the different municipal services shall be integrated into a unique data repository, which is provided by this platform, and based on all this data, creating the intelligence of the city and the dashboards that will help both the municipal managers and the municipal technicians to create the integral management of the city. And finally, in many cases, all this data coming from the different municipal services is used only for internal consumption. However, thanks to this platform, all this data will be available for entrepreneurs and the local fabric as open data to serve as an engine of the city growth with the development of different solutions, applications, and services on top of this data. As you know, nowadays Santander is an international reference within the smart cities, and this is due to the combination of different factors. One of them is our active participation in European research projects, which turn the city into a urban laboratory, as well as the development of different city initiatives, which allow managing public services in a more efficient way. So the role of Santander City Council in these European research projects includes the collaboration with the technical partners in the definition of the pilots, aligning the project objectives and the needs of the city, facilitating the implementation of these pilots in the city, and also involving end users to participate in these pilots. Thanks to this type of projects, it is possible to test and validate new solutions, new technologies, new services in a real environment. And lessons learned from these pilots are integrated in the municipal services. As you can see on the left side of this slide, since 2010, we have participated in 28 European research projects, and we have collaborated with more than 300 partners. So among these projects, 3 of them are related to the blockchain technology. The first one is the Poseidon project, which aims to support organization in the management of the personal data by ensuring compliance with GDPR. And this project finalized at the beginning of this year. The second project is a token, which is about the transformative impact of distributed technologies in public services. And the third project is the MSEC project, which aims to improve or to enhance the security in the smart city solutions by combining different types of technologies, including the blockchain technology. So the MSEC project, that is multi-layer security technologies for hyper-connected smart cities, is an European-Japan research collaborative project in which 6 partners from Japan and 6 partners from Europe are working in order to enhance the security in the smart city solutions by combining different types of innovative technologies, such as IoT, cloud, blockchain, big data, and end-to-end security. So the consortium is developing an innovative platform which includes different types of modules, components that enhance the security at different layers, including the device layer, the communication layer, the end-to-end security, and also the storage layer. This platform that is being developed within the project is also being tested and validated in the 2 smart cities which take part of this project. That is the Fujisawa city, located in Japan, and Santander city, located in Europe. Additionally, this platform will be available to IoT stakeholders who will be able to test and to develop new solutions, making use of the tools developed within this project. So one of the pilots that has been implemented in Santander in this project is the home monitoring security system for aging people. The main goal of this pilot is to improve the quality of life of people who may be at risk due to factors of age, loneliness, dependency, or frailty without the interaction with the technology. So in this pilot, through an IoT platform and a set of home sensors deployed in the end users' houses, it is possible to monitor in a remote way end users' activities when they are at home and detect emergency situations based on a set of rules and alerts previously configured. So in this pilot, we distinguish two types of users. What we call the end users, who are elderly people who live alone, are users of the teleassistance municipal service, and in whose houses different type of home sensors have been installed, including a bed occupancy sensor, and door window opening sensor, and a smart plug, and a movement sensor. And also the second type of users are the teleassistance operators, who are in charge, among other tasks, of visualizing and monitoring the activity of the end users and contact them if there is any emergency situation. So as you may imagine, this pilot involves processing sensitive data, such as is the activity happening at a specific end user's house. So by the use of the MSEC solution, it is possible to go beyond compliance of GDPR by adding extra security measures that enhance the security in all the process. So in this particular case, this pilot benefits from the MSEC crypto companion database, which has been developed within this project and which is a parallel encrypted system for data storage that is connected to the blockchain. So this database encrypts the sensitive data with an asymmetric public-private key pair, and each user, so each teleoperator, has its own key pair in order to access to the encrypted database. Additionally, a hash is created for the encrypted data, and this hash is stored in the quorum database, which allows to verify at any time if the data stored has been modified, because any attempt to manipulate the data will create a new hash. And finally, all the data flow from the sensors to the cloud and from the cloud to the application is secure thanks to another module developed within this project, that is the security manager, which ensures the authentication, authorization, and accounting in the whole system. And I would like to finalize my presentation sharing with you a video which better illustrates this pilot, but I try to run it, but the sound doesn't work. So maybe you can check it after the event. So that's all from my side. If you have any question, I'll be glad to answer.
Thank you. So thank you very much, Sonia. I remind to the participants, to the viewers on the Zoom platform, and also on live broadcast on Facebook, that you can ask questions here directly in the Q&A section on Zoom, or in the comments on Facebook Live. Sonia, I do have a question. Well, first of all, congratulations on very extensive work in the smart city area, and also in particular in the blockchain projects that we're interested in as part of our conversation today. But it's really nice to see forward-looking cities that are working with modern technologies to improve the conditions for the citizens and on overall quality of services and of the city and so on. So really congratulations on that. The question is based on the experience, particularly in the three of the projects that you have been working with, Poseidon and SEC and Token, which maybe you could share some insights from the regulatory perspective, from the policy perspective. What were the challenges, what were the obstacles, or I don't know, the hurdles that you have to overcome from the regulatory perspective when working on these projects?
Okay, as the previous speakers commented, the GDPR compliance is very important as one of them said, or both of them, is very important, the compliance by design. So at the very beginning of the project, you need to take into account the GDPR before starting with the design, because if you think about it once the work has been, or the implementation has started, maybe it's too late to modify the work done. So one of our advices is to take into account the GDPR from the very beginning. And we involve also the different DPOs in the different entities in order to have their opinion. And another barrier that sometimes is very complicated to overcome is to translate the technical language to the legal language, because the technical perspective is as they speak in another kind of language. And when you need to explain to the DPO that usually is a lawyer who speaks in another language, sometimes it's complicated to find a balance. So that requires an extra effort.
Thank you, Sonia. Thanks again for sharing, and thank you for answering the question. Johannes, the time has come to you please share your slides and please share experience. I know that you have some very interesting things from the Blockchain Observatory and some conclusions and some insights. You have been working with the government sector and the public sector, and society aspect is also important for you. If you could please take the stage and share your thoughts.
Thank you. I'm happy to do those, and I have a pleasure to be the final speaker, so I can elaborate maybe on the top of the excellent points you've done already, and there has been a very I think good points regarding the right timing of the regulation, and then generally the challenges and the languages and those on. I could start maybe giving while I sharing my screen there, giving a bit kind of context where I come from into this topic. Wait a second, not to bore you with too much with details, but if I yes, there we go, and then now can you see it well?
It works so far, yes.
Great. Okay, so yeah, so thanks for this opportunity. I'm very glad to share my experiences and some learnings we've been doing regarding the blockchain and regulation. I come from Demos Helsinki. We are a globally operating think tank working with the government, cities, companies, universities, and other partners. In a way, trying to build a fair and sustainable and joyful next era. And then my presentation and speech is pretty much based on our experiences with token project, which is Horizon 2020 project. But maybe starting with the kind of like how I come to this regulation and blockchain scheme. I think that it's quite obvious point, but how well-functioning societies are based on trust. How the innovation requires stable and secure environment and enabling people to trust each other. And of course, for that, we've created during the decades different kind of trust machines, such as the regulation and the banking systems and justice system and public bureaucracy and so on. And then what is alarming and worrying is that despite of the successful of the public government to be able to serve citizens and tackle the big challenges, the trust between citizens and the government is very low on a global scale. And based on the Edelman trust parameter, the government is perceived as incompetent, meaning that delivering on its promises, and unethical, referring to doing the right things and working to improve the society. And that can be very paralyzing to the generative society and to the innovation, to the implementing of meaningful implementation of the new technologies. Okay, so what is the blockchain then to do with this? Of course, the generative, as we all know, it's a technology that's very much based on that people can collaborate without having to go through a neutral central authority, and then it's kind of like a machine for creating trust. It can be, and it has been originally thought as kind of like opposite of those traditional trust machines of the societies such as banking. But in the other hand, to implement the blockchain, it relies on the, as said, on the social cohesion, political stability, rule of law that governments often provide. And that's why in token project, we are focusing, especially our work is focusing to improve the capabilities of public sector and public governance to create an environment where the new technologies can be innovated meaningful ways. And yeah, as we know, there has been a big hype among the blockchain, how it can enhance trust in the society, how we can tackle the corruption with the blockchain-based solutions, how we can increase transparency and make people to trust, for example, the land registry, just as this church's example here. But there's also discussion if this is a big hype for nothing. Is the blockchain, what is it good solution for, and does it have any content under the hype? And that's the approach that we have in Token Project. We have 10 research partners, European research partners, and we explore what is the transformative impact of DLT in public services. What are the opportunities? What are the challenges, and how to grasp those opportunities and tackle the challenges from the public sector's point of view. So in a way, in other words, we try to transform public services and solve issues related to trust, transparency, privacy, and so on. And in the same time, as we heard from the Santander case, we have a pilots where we provide public administration with public service ready components and try to ease up the adoption of new technologies, and also like build the capabilities for civil servants and public organization to utilize those. What this means in practice, we have among the Santander case, we have 4 use cases. One is related to public funding distribution. One is urban logistics in the Leuven in Belgium, and one is related to management of public accounts, trying to make them more transparent and enable citizens' participation into those. In all of those, the technological partner has developed a DLT-based solution or platform, and then working very closely together with the public organization. They try to implement those and then learn and test which works and which doesn't. We don't have results from those the use cases yet so much, because the implementation period has started quite recently. And then of course, we do research, and then we participate in public events such as this, and then we especially in demos, we run the token policy observatory process, where we gather the people from different perspectives and from different backgrounds to discuss together to find the best ways to implement and identify what kind of changes, what kind of new capabilities, new structures, new processes, or new regulation we need in the public sector to transform our public services to enhance privacy, enhance efficiency, trustworthiness, and transparency, which are kind of the core of the promise of these DLT technologies, as discussed earlier as well. But from that, we need to build a better public governance as well. Couple of the general learnings from this token policy observatory before I go to the regulation part. First one is that if you want to successfully implement the project, I would say any kind of project, but especially DLT project, which is very complicated technology, which is very hard to understand. It needs lots of education, lots of interaction, as Arnold also described, lots of engagement, co-creation, and without that, even though the technical solution would be great, it doesn't work so well. And generally, of course, there are challenges. Maybe this also described, I think, the challenges of the regulation, how our structures, our institutions, processes, culture in the public sector are of course developed in a very different era, and how then we implement decentralized technology in a centralized environment, in an environment that has been created after the first industrial revolution. And then the third point, which leads us to the regulation, is that often these challenges are very much related to the regulation, standards, failure modes, and accountability, and we instead of having the technological problems. Then I have a couple of the challenges regarding the regulation which we have identified. Some of these were presented very well already here, so I try not to repeat, but instead maybe build on those mentioned things. This is very in a general level, and of course, first of all, as said, it's quite obvious that we need some kind of regulation, and if unregulated environment helps only bad actors, I would say. And even though blockchain might be neutral in a way technology, but how it is used, it's not, of course, neutral. That's obvious, but the important point, it can have a very different ending points, and regulation is an important role how tech unfolds. Another point before is also that actually blockchain is also very powerful governance structures that regulates its users. And when we talk about the governance of the blockchain, we often refer to the maintaining technical protocol, but we need a public governance and regulation for that. But it's not easy. There are. Sonia mentioned that how the GDPR has to be taken to consider early enough, but also generally how if you think from the regulator's point of view, there's always the danger of both regulating too early or too late. It is often likely to take several years before the technology's full potential becomes clear, and in that time, regulators should in a way stay their hands or find ways to accommodate new approaches within existing structures and processes, rather than a risk stifling fast new ideas with overly prescriptive rules. And of course, the one solution for that has been the already mentioned regulatory sandbox, which has been quite widely utilized. But I think Arnold described very well the challenges and limitation of this solution. Another challenge related to the if the regulation should be primarily intrinsic or extrinsic, meaning we can control digital environment based on legal codes or technical codes. In other words, legal regulation happens when we monitor and then execute afterwards by authorities. but the legal or technical regulation is placed within the code itself, making it very hard to break the rules in the first place. And that's of course very difficult for the regulators, and that require lots of that already like mentioned interaction and basic understanding of the technology from the civil servant or regulators point of view, and as well as the kind of solid interaction between different sectors and between different actors. Also, I think it was Arnold who thought about like this how these codes and algorithms like regulate, and often the kind of like ethical issues are also technical issues in new innovation. So if there are like some bad results regarding the ethics or regarding our privacy or something, it can be often it is because there has been like misunderstanding of the coding itself. So that's why it's so important to start the discussion and to have a kind of like interaction already when developing the technologies. Third point is what the tutor described in the beginning very well with the different regulations and law, how the blockchain can be implemented in any domains, and regulation is of course like often domain based. So it is like it's quite maybe difficult to create a regulation for a certain technology because it can be implemented in so many different ways. Of course, we can have, and we have like ad hoc solutions, like okay, like we can have sector specific protocols. Let's say car manufacturers share your data with the maintenance companies or those kind of things. But still, the challenge is there. And regarding that, there are also like many like different actors and regarding the new technology. So what is the target of the regulation is not so clear. Are we regulating the network users or the systems or miners or institutions or businesses like the wallets or exchanges? So what is the and they require very different kind of approaches. And then fifth point, our competition law is very much based on ex post evaluation, but maybe regarding this point of legal and technical codes, what would be like kind of ex ante incentives? Maybe we need new kind of solutions for that. There is discussion and there are solutions regarding the outcome-based regulation or performance-based regulation. For example, in Rwanda, it was not related to blockchain, but the government of Rwanda created a performance-based legislation model related to improving blood delivery for rural hospitals by drones, by setting up the guidelines for the companies who would do that thing. And then under those guidelines, they were able to operate, and the regulation and the rules were defined afterwards. And I think that the GDPR challenges were described already also very, very well. And of course, yeah, that is especially challenging for the blockchain solution. It binds blockchain, of course, but even though it is the GDPR, generally it's planned for the world where data is centrally collected and analyzed. So there's a risk that regulation renders the operations of blockchain unlawful in a wrong way, and hindering then the meaningful implementation and new innovation, new practices related there. So I would be very happy to together to discuss these many challenges which I presented and in the other previous speeches as well, and to think what would be then the actual different ways to solve these tensions and challenges, and what are how could we regulate in a meaningful way, but they're not hindering the innovations.
Thank you, Johannes. It was last but definitely not least, a very high quality insights and a lot of things to think about. Unfortunately, our time is running out. We're just over 5 minutes left. And I would like to ask actually, well, all of you ideally, even though you somewhat have already touched upon that, and maybe Johannes, you can go first on this one. You talked about the challenges of regulation, you talked about the need of it. If you could think of, I don't know, maybe a couple of recommendations that you could give to the policymakers, to the regulators, on some approaches or some areas that they should focus on, or maybe what can be implemented, that would be very helpful if you could share your thoughts.
Yes, that's a good question, and I would like to kind of elaborate a bit this framework idea which Arnold brought up. I'm not sure if I got it right, but I would see it important that when we do the regulation or actually any policies, we would have some mechanisms or some system where the policymakers or politicians could set up the objectives, for example, or set up the challenges and the solutions, how to do those and how to regulate, or what kind of like other policy solutions would be needed, would be then done together with an interaction of different actors and from different sectors of the society. Kind of like actually, some researcher call it like humble government, the model where the government set the objectives and then co-create together with the different stakeholders the solutions, because the government is the one, not the entity who knows everything as nothing is.
Okay, thank you, Johannes. Sonia, can you also share your thoughts about or share your recommendations or maybe ideas on how the regulation should look like or could look like to address the main challenges, well, particularly in the GDPR area, because pretty much all of you agreed that this is the most critical one for blockchain solutions, but not limited to the GDPR. What should be the approaches? What should be the actual, maybe some very specific recommendations on how it should be addressed, let's say on the European Union level first, and then maybe on national level too.
I think that Tudor commented during his presentation that it's important to set up a task force in order to create groups, not homogeneous, but heterogeneous, including technician people and also the policy makers, in order that between all of them are able to understand what are the needs and what are the requirements. So I think that is an important point, to work all together in order to achieve the final result and to elaborate the regulation that it will be real and can be useful for all the agents in the society, not only for the technician, but also for the end users and the policy makers. So I think that it will help.
Great, thanks. That's a very, very sound approach. Tudor, I know that you already pretty much answered my question in your slides, but if you have something to add, something maybe practical or implementable, some wishes to the policymakers and regulators in the blockchain area.
So after hearing what everybody had to say in their presentations, I started thinking that we could also approach it the other way around. So again, we're focusing on what the authorities can do, what the regulating body can do. And one point I made, and I want to stress out, is this idea of involving the industry. Sonia also mentioned this let's say, cross-domain collaboration between everybody involved, so the best result is achieved. But I don't think it has to be unilateral. We don't have to wait for the regulatory bodies to lend a helping hand and say, okay, we want to get you involved in regulating. From where I'm coming, I think the entrepreneurs and the founders and the startup builders and the community builders also have some sort of a responsibility to shape the ecosystem in which they want to get involved. So for instance, I would like to see more startup founders devoting some part of their time to propose or to work within industry associations in order to, or even to join industry associations in the first place, to propose to the regulatory bodies different changes to regulatory frameworks that could be useful for them to be able to achieve their results in their local or regional or European ecosystem. So I think part of what needs to be done falls in the responsibility not only of the regulatory body, but specifically in the hands of the startup founders that need not only build a business for the sake of building a business, but rather build a business in a way that makes it easier for the ones that are going to follow them and follow in their footsteps to be able to build a business, a community, an ecosystem, and so on. So every time you're a startup founder, I think there's an intrinsic mission to try to make the ecosystem a better place for yourself, but also for the other people around you. And again, it's part of your, let's call it a mission or the values that I think you need to bring with you when you start a business, specifically when you focus on emerging technologies and you're going down the unbeaten path.
Amazing. Very sound advice and wishes for the founders and for the grassroots movements, so to say. Thank you, Tudor. And we have just over a minute left. Arnaud, please share your final remarks and recommendations.
Okay, yes, thanks. Oh, wait, I have to unmute. Oh, there it is already. After the presentation of Johannes, I like to stress that we need, as a tool, as a mechanism for change and adaptation. And that would really solve a lot of issues, because then you can start to build in an evolutionary way, bottom up, and then the systems are not that complex. We provide such a mechanism, and it's basically solving the topic. Like we all know by now that some systems by design already solve GDPR, then it's off the table. And there are many more challenges that are open and we can solve. We are working now on a gender cap solution, basically closing the gender cap by design in governmental systems. So, and I think you just, well, in Holland we have, we have in our constitution Article 1 that you should not discriminate. So we should provide such code and such tools and such method that people can comply by just using the tools. It's just our new digital infrastructure. In the past we had railroads, and now we should provide people with proper tools and systems to use. And that's where I stop, because the time is out.
Thank you, Arnaud. Thank you very much. Thank you, our panelists. Thank you, Sonia, Arnaud, Johannes, Tudor, for joining. I have two very quick questions to the audience. Thanks for listening to us. Please, please vote to please share on your answers on the polls. And meanwhile, thank you, everyone. Thank you, the panelists, for joining, for spending your time, very valuable time, and sharing the insights and knowledge with us. I hope, and actually I know that the insights from this discussion and also from other information that we are gathering on the policy and regulation from the field, so to say, from the practitioners like you and from the people embedded in the ecosystem, will definitely share the outcomes of these discussions with the European Commission. And we hope that this will influence the regulatory work in the area of blockchain and other technologies as well. So thank you again, and let's go to the final poll. And yes, we hope that this event was useful for you. Thank you again, and we will meet in other conversations, other webinars of Blockstart. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Till
you.
next time. It
Looking
was
forward to
very
continue.
useful. It was a very nice group. We should do this again.
Definitely.
Okay.
Let's continue.
Yes. Bye, Johannes. It was really cool.
Bye.
Yeah.